Joining us first on CNBC, House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce, Republican from California, joins us from California. Mr. Chairman, good morning to you.
Good morning.
In the past hour, Samantha Powers talking to the UN, saying what's been reported, namely that they suspect surface-to-air missile fired from a separatist-controlled location. And she says it can't rule out technical assistance from Russian personnel. Do we think that's what happened?
Yeah, this is very suspicious because in the past, 2 different Ukrainian planes have been shot down by that particular device. And so now that you've got this jetliner shot down just in an area, I would say it's about 20 miles from the Russian border. Very suspicious. We need the international observers on the ground, and to have that happen, we need a ceasefire. Russia should help us get that ceasefire.
Get the ceasefire, and I assume you believe they should also help ensure that this crash site, which is 10 miles wide, is not contaminated before the NBC or the FBI can get there.
They should allow the teams in immediately. There are 40 Dutch inspectors on the ground right now. As you know, most of the passengers were from Holland. They need to get out there to that site. To have that happen, they and the international community are ready to go right now. We've got our lead inspector in Kyiv right now, and the only thing holding it up is cooperation from Russia. Those separatists take their orders and get their weapons, most of their weapons, from Russia. Russia needs to cooperate now.
Mr. Chairman, did you see the comments that Hillary Clinton has made to Charlie Rose? She's suggesting, actually, that it's the Europeans that should take the lead on sorting this out. Do you agree? Do you feel, as we await the President speaking in now 26 minutes' time, that the White House is playing the role that it should do?
Well, the reality is that the Europeans are on the ground. With those 40 Dutch inspectors, you also have the wider inspection teams of ICAO and the other international teams that deal in civil aviation cases like this. The question is, who's got that black box? Let's get it. The question is, let's get to the crash site before, as you say, it's contaminated. And let's get some cooperation out of Russia to show that they're going to work with the international community, and especially the European community, that frankly is on the ground right now.
Chairman Royce, I do want to ask you about the situation, the escalating situation in Israel and Gaza. Yes. I know this is an issue that is very important to you. You have been very supportive of Israel in the past. What is the role of the U.S. president there? Is he required to get in here and start negotiating a ceasefire, at least come out? As you know, PR is so important when it comes to Israel against Gaza and the international criticism that is starting to build.
It is, but the unusual thing here is that Egypt negotiated a ceasefire. For 6 hours, Israel held its fire as rocket after rocket, and these are long-range rockets, were sent, targeting Tel Aviv, targeting central Israel. Now, in an environment like that, where you're talking with Hamas, and Hamas is demanding more money and saying that they're not going to stop, in an environment like that, Israel naturally is going to have to continue to try to suppress that fire. So, yes, there's a role for us in helping, but what do you do when you have a terrorist organization that will not quit launching these rockets? And what do you do with Iran, who continues to build the inventory for Hamas? They were just caught bringing in more long-range missiles to Hamas.
Mr. Chairman, my concern would be that people are not aware of what is actually going on fully in the country. We keep seeing these very surgical pictures of nighttime activities where they're bombing tunnels, which is supplied by the Israeli army. If you look at the figures, the Palestinians say 263 people, civilians, have been killed since July 7. The United Nations says 22,000 people are displaced, and it is rising rapidly at a time when Netanyahu is calling up 18,000 reservists. This is a humanitarian disaster, surely.
I have to tell you something. I was in Haifa during the war with Hezbollah, and they targeted Israel civilians every single day. I went down to the trauma hospital. 600 victims were down there being treated. It's only the Iron Dome that's preventing this situation from killing Israelis as we speak. But the reality is that on the other side, they were putting these launchers in civilian areas and using civilians in order to try to disguise the launchers. Now, Israel has broadcast into these areas before they make an attack. They ask people to leave the site from which they're launching these rockets. What would you do? What would you do in an environment where you notify people that you're going to take out that rocket launcher and people refuse in solidarity to leave the site of that rocket launcher? This is a very, very difficult situation because of the indoctrination of Hamas and this suicide mentality that so many have who are a part of Hamas.
Mr. Chairman, back to Ukraine and the crash. Yes. We have the world's airlines avoiding airspace, right?
Yeah.
That 24 hours ago, they were going right through to create a link between Western Europe and Asia. Do you believe it's now safe to fly to Europe?
Well, it's safe to fly to Europe, but in prudence, what is happening is that flights are being rerouted so they do not fly over eastern Ukraine until this situation is settled. Now, I would say that this could be settled easily with the cooperation of Russia. There is a very generous peace offer made by Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, which will de-escalate this crisis. We need a ceasefire now, and it's in Russia's hands to get the separatists to cooperate because they can only continue their resistance on the ground with Russian training, with Russian weapons, and with the leadership of the Russian agents that have been sent into this region around Donetsk. So now's the time to get that cooperation.
And if Putin doesn't do that, if for some reason he's even further isolated, doesn't provide the cooperation you're looking for, how should the sanctions look any differently than what we heard on Wednesday night?
Oh, I think at this point, Russia's becoming so isolated internationally, and especially with respect to public opinion in Asia and in Europe. There's enormous pressure here. So we need to build on that pressure. But part of diplomacy right now is to figure out how to get these teams on the ground, get this ceasefire in place. I imagine Chancellor Merkel is probably on the phone or will be soon talking to President Vladimir Putin about the necessity here to de-escalate this crisis. Let's find a way out of this. Let's find a way out of this horrible, horrible tragedy to have Russia cease and desist, and maybe the entire international community agree in the future. There will be no more transfer to separatist groups, to rebel groups of weapons by any major power, because it only leads to this type of crisis.
Mr. Chairman, appreciate your time today very much. Ed Royce, Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, joining us from California today.